Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us bright and early this very foggy morning. Just a quick reminder for everybody, you should have seen a pop-up meeting now. This will be a recorded session so that we can make this training available later on, and for folks who weren't able to make it to any of the training sessions. So this course is the hands-on workshop, which is the follow-up to the intro course, which hopefully you should have been able to complete either live or via recording that was available. We will do a little bit of a recap, but if you haven't completed that session, you may have a lot of questions throughout, and don't worry, we will be covering a lot of what we went over in the intro session today. And also don't feel free to ask questions in the chat or just speak up as we're moving through. Don't feel afraid to flag me down and say, hey, can you explain that again? So the reason you were assigned this course was because you've been either designated by someone in your unit as either a requester or as approver of capital projects or general construction projects for your unit. This will probably be, this will be a brand new role as adaptive as a brand new, but it's functionally very similar to what you were doing with the old systems. Adaptive planning is the tool that will be used for capital intake and planning that integrates to provide a full project lifecycle management tool along with Workday and eBuilder. Adaptive planning will be replacing the CNI system for capital planning requests. And in January, it will be replacing the FOD project intake tool for all other construction project requests. So it's important to know that it's now one system that will be doing handling all of that now. Project requests that you enter in the tool go through the approval and budgeting process before costs are charged against the project, and that happens in those other systems I mentioned. So before we get too far in, I want to take a moment to introduce the team here. So I'm Kevin Markolowski. I'm the capital planner with the Planning, Architecture, and Real Estate Office in A&P. I also have with me Kelly McGuire.
Hi, I'm Kelly McGuire. I am part of the Enterprise Project team working on the implementation of Workday, eBuilder, and Workday Adaptive Planning. I previously worked at OSU Medical Center involved in the capital process and have been working with Kevin, Pear, Capital Corps, and university process owners on developing this system over the past year. Other persons on the call are Rachel Saxa and Eileen Lehman, and they'll be assisting us today with our training. Just to call out again, to reiterate what Kevin said, is if you could please, if you have questions, address them to everybody in the chat. Thank you.
Yeah, that just helps. It's a lot of the times I'm engrossed in my PowerPoint presentation, so I might miss a question in chat, and that just allows the other people that are on the meeting to make sure that we get your questions addressed or flag me down to make sure we get it answered. So thank you for that. Yeah, so just a couple of setting reminders as we move on today. This is a pretty hands-on session. We will be breaking out into breakout rooms to make sure that you're comfortable with all of the activities that you need to be able to do in adaptive. So just be attentive and participate actively when we get to those. It's really important that you all understand the system, because this will be your one-stop shop for requesting projects moving forward at the university. So just make sure that you're paying attention, and when we get to those breakout rooms, if you can turn your video on, just so that we know who we have with us. It's just easier to talk to a face there. So we're going to do a real quick status check with everybody. I know we have a couple of people in this meeting so far. I think we have a poll that we'll be able to launch here. But basically, this will just be a real quick status check on whether or not you've been able to get into adaptive, whether you've logged in or not. And if you have, how much experience you have, whether you just poked around or you have actively been using the system. Okay. Looks like a majority of the people today have not logged in, and at least one has been able to log in and look around in the system. So I'll make sure that when we get into the overview, we will be doing a, just as an overview of our agenda here, we will be doing a recap of a lot of the topics that we covered in the introductory session. So don't worry if you haven't logged in, we will be covering a lot of that again, a little bit briefer. Today we'll be covering project entry into Adaptive. So what do you need to do to request a new project? We'll make sure that we cover that for both. Today we'll be focused primarily on capital project requests, since I'm the capital planner and that's kind of the world I come from. But just know that the process is very both capital and non-capital requests. So a lot of what you'll be hearing, you'll hear me mentioning capital projects, but it's exactly the same for all the other projects that are under $200,000 as well. We'll go over how to enter project funding and some more complex funding scenarios. So if you have a project that has multiple funding sources or is being funded over multiple years, we'll cover how to enter that into the system. We'll touch on some of the reports that are available, and we'll also touch on approvals. So by the end of the course today, you should be able to describe how the capital plan request moves through the data, all the way through the new tools. You'll be able to talk about some of the new terminology that is being introduced by the new system. Adaptive, as I mentioned, is completely brand new for the university. So just understanding, what your versions are, what levels are, things like that. It's easy to get mixed up before you start using the system. So making sure that you understand that. And then also understanding what data is required from whom and when during the process. Adaptive is something that's open and can always be updated as the capital project entry period goes on. So understanding kind of those dates and deadlines and who does what along the way. So I'm going to have Kelly talk a little bit about the process overall and how Adaptive kind of fits into that here.
I am going to focus today on the first two boxes here in the business process. Today, as Kevin said, it's heavily weighted on capital, but the same principles apply to non-capital requests in the system. The columns are the same in both systems. The non-capital approval process is much simpler, as you know, and at this time, you as the units do not have permission to view the non-capital sheet. So when we go to demonstrate and to get into the system, you will not have access to that non-capital sheet. New to the project request process flow is that all FOD project construction requests will be starting in Adaptive beginning in January. So capital and non-capital requests will all be coming through Adaptive. There'll be a link on the FOD website similar to what there is today. A request that needs an FOD estimate will be gathered via report by FOD. In eBuilder, the FOD will create the estimate and then communicate that back to you, the requester, the estimate details. The details then need to be entered into Adaptive for the review process to continue within the unit. Once a request is approved, it will be integrated to Workday, where accounting and project details take place, tracking and completion. There are columns identified in Adaptive around eBuilder that you will need to populate, and we'll review those during the training today. Security in Adaptive is restricted to your unit access to enter and to approve requests in the sheet, whether it's capital or non-capital. The dates are still going to be maintained by central administration when the unit will have access to the capital sheet. The non-capital sheet will be available once it's turned on for you throughout the year. Today, we'll be focusing on these three main roles here: unit project requester, unit intake approver level 1 and level 2. Every role within Adaptive can make changes to the request as it proceeds through the process. And today we'll be practicing that. As Adaptive is configured today, there is no workflow. That is a future update in the process. As units are reviewing and requesting and approving requests, you will be using the unit status approval column, and you will be using reports to make decisions about those requests. We will review that today during the class. There's also a weighting and ranking tool that has been built. That's for a future training.
Thank you. And Kelly, did you see there was a quick question in chat? I was hoping maybe you could touch on this before we moved on.
Sure.
The approval hierarchy, is that the same as it is in Workday, or is that a separate approver hierarchy from Workday?
So there's a project hierarchy in Workday, and there are cost center hierarchies in Workday. They are two separate individual items. There are very many cost centers in Workday, like there are cost centers today in PeopleSoft. There are fewer project hierarchies.
Okay. So we're going to move really quickly into a quick definitions quiz. This is really to inform us on what we need to make sure that we cover today in today's session. This will all be information that was covered in the intro course. And again, if you haven't taken that, don't worry. This quiz really just gives us information on what we need to make sure that we reiterate today. So if you're not sure, you can just go ahead and make a guess. And then we'll know what we need to cover once we get into the system. So question one is whether a financial scenario for a fiscal year, what is that called? Is that the version, dimension, sheet, or workbook? Second question is what determines the information that you can see, whether that's your employee number, your position number, the level that you're assigned to, or the hierarchy? Which of these is not true of a sheet? It's where data is stored. It's exclusively for capital requests. It consists of multiple dimensions, or it's open to view year round. And then the final question is true or false. Dimension has a list of possible values to categorize data. So just a few questions. A lot of this information, I believe we covered all of this in our intro course. Excuse me. Okay. Yeah, so a financial scenario for a fiscal year is defined by the version. So I'll make sure to point that out along the way because it's easy to get tripped up. If you're looking for something or you see something maybe you think you shouldn't be seeing, it's probably because you're in the incorrect version. So I'll point out along the way where you can switch between those. The next one looks like a level and hierarchy. It's tough because it's kind of synonyms of the same thing, but the official adaptive terminology is level. So the level that you're assigned to determines what information you can see within an adaptive version, which is not true of a sheet. The answer for this one is actually that it's used exclusively for capital requests. So sheets exist for both capital and non-capital requests. It is where data is stored. All data is stored within a sheet that live within versions. And then it looks like everyone got this last one correct. So good job on that. So yeah, we'll make sure that we cover all of those as we move on today. So for most users, generally speaking, during a capital planning year, you may only make 1 or 2 new requests during that year. If you are one of those people who manage a long list of requests, or maybe you're re-entering a large number of requests into adaptive this year just because we're switching systems, we do have a separate session to guide you through a project upload where basically you put your projects into an Excel spreadsheet, format it in a certain way, and then adaptive can just basically pull those projects right in and you can edit them from there. But we'll be focusing today on manual entries. If we get enough interest in that, or you'd like to know about that spreadsheet upload project, reach out to me. I'm already working with a couple of other units on getting that done for their capital projects that they need to re-enter. So don't hesitate to reach out. And then just a reminder that adaptive is, and this is kind of more along the lines of security. So if you think back to your security trainings that we do every year, adaptive is only approved for S2 internal data. That's data defined, that's used to conduct university business and operations by those whose jobs require it. And that's the default classification level. So that's like no private or sensitive data in the names, descriptors, or other fields that are in adaptive. And again, for more information on that, I'll point you to your security training and the that information there. Excuse me. So for the manual entries, the objectives for this session are basically to be able to navigate around the capital request sheet, be able to get there and know which columns are where. Add dimension values to create a project ID. That's something that we'll cover a little bit more in depth in the next slide, just because that's probably the trickiest part in all of it, in all of Adaptive. It's going to be completely new compared to the CNI process. And it's easy to get tripped up. So we'll make sure that we cover that in more depth. And we'll describe what dimensions don't need to be completed by you. There are some fields that are either calculated or are done by the Capital Core team a little bit later on. So understanding which ones are yours to fill out and which ones aren't. So I mentioned that this was really kind of the most complex or really just the most cumbersome thing to understand about Adaptive. It's that the relationship between these three fields, the request ID, the request description, and the project request. So the request ID is kind of, you can think of it as this would be similar to your project number or your CNI number. This is your unique ID that basically is your short form identifier for your project. And it's made up of three distinct components itself. The first three or I think it's either 2 or 3 characters is just an abbreviation of your unit. So for this example here, it's NEW. That would indicate this is a project coming from the Newark campus. The next 2 digits are from the plan year in which the project is being entered. So in this example that we'll be using today, we're entering this into the FY 2022 capital plan year. So the 2022 or the 22 is coming directly from that fiscal year. And then the next 5 digits are just a sequence, an incremental sequence of project numbers. So just starting from 0001 all the way up to however many projects you have that year. So there is a link to the Administrative Resource Center, which has really great work guides. One of them is on how to create unique request IDs that covers what your unit's abbreviation is, and then basically covers exactly what I just said, just as a really helpful reference. So we'll make sure that we get a link to that posted in chat as well. The request description is really just your project name. Excuse me. So that's basically just what's your short form name of what your project is. Just a quick note on this. Since this is data that's talking between all the other systems, the system will not accept any project names that have abbreviations in it. That's just a quirk of the system, and it's really to try to get uniform data across all of the systems. So if you have like conference room, don't use CONF as for conference and RM for room. Just go ahead and spell out the entire project name. And then those 2 unique things together combine together to make one longer, what we call the project request. And it's basically just those 2 individual fields smashed together to make one larger unique field. So all 3 of these are unique themselves, and they combine to form a 3rd unique longer request. So I'm going to jump into the system and show you how to add those. Then we'll go into, we'll kind of hand it off to you. I think that if we stay as small of a group that we are now, we might just stay in one meeting room without going into the breakout rooms. So I'll show you how to do it. We'll hand over the reins, let you add in a sample project. And then we'll move on to some of the other fields. So the system we're going to imagine today is one that a lot of people can probably relate to. We're going to be renovating a conference room that we have in a building that we have space in, and we need to add it into Adaptive to get the process rolling. So I'm going to jump over to Adaptive. I think that there's the link in chat for us. And I'll stop here along the way to make sure that everyone understands. I think that we were working behind the scenes to make sure people were getting logged in, but just so we know that everyone understands how to do that. Once you get to this main splash page, it's tempting to just enter your whole username and password here and hit submit, but if you do that, you'll actually get an error. What you need to do is just enter your OSU name.number at osu.edu, your whole email address here. Hit submit, and then that will bring you to the OSU single sign-on page. If I hadn't already logged in today, I would be at the OSU login page and I would need to enter my username and password there. But since I had logged in, it brought me right into Adaptive. So just a quick overview of how to get around inside of Adaptive. this will be your main adaptive splash screen. In order to get anywhere in adaptive, you're going to be using this Workday navigation menu, which is always in the top left corner here. No matter where you are in adaptive, you can always come up here and click this and it'll bring up your sidebar for navigation. So today,
Has everybody, I'm sorry, Kevin, has everybody been able to log in?
Yeah, that's probably a good check to make sure that everyone's able to actually get in before we move. You can either just throw us a thumbs up in the, if you go to participants, you can either throw us a thumbs up there or just say it in the chat whether anyone's having issues logging in.
Or if we need to go back over it?
I'm not seeing anybody saying that they haven't been able to log in, so hopefully that's a good sign. No issues. Okay. All right. All right. If we do have anything that comes up, let us know in chat. Or if you need us to go over that, let us know and I can log back out and log back in. It's once you know not to enter your password in that main page and to wait until you get to the next page. It's pretty simple, but it's just a quirk that you need to be aware of when you're logging in. Okay, so back to navigation. As I was saying, no matter where you are within adaptive, you can always click this Workday emblem up here and it'll open up this sidebar to bring you to the navigation menu. Today, we're going to be functioning primarily in the capital request sheet. So we're going to go ahead and click that. So here you can see the different sheets that you can select between. I believe right now the non-capital request sheet is locked. That functionality will be releasing with the Workday go live, which happens in early in January. So don't worry if you don't see this yet. It's not broken. It's not available yet. Today we'll be functioning primarily in the capital request sheet, but I also wanted to point out here, this is where you will select between both your levels and your version. So starting with version, make sure, as the system is already live for FY 2022 capital requests, make sure that you're in the test data for training version when you're entering your sample data. We don't want to make any issues with data in the actual request sheet. So you'll be able to select between your version there, but just by clicking that drop-down box. So make sure you're on test data for training. And I also want to point out the level here. If you're assigned only one level, you'll only be able to select one level. So I want to show you an example of that. If you're at the Ohio State Newark, that's all you would be able to select from. However, if you were a larger unit that had a more complex breakdown, an example I always use is student life. I'm going to show you that really quickly. So you can see that student life has kind of the parent student life, but then it also has underneath it, it has all of these subunits like dining services, housing, Ohio Union. So if you were the highest level approver of student life, you would be able to select between each of these individual levels, each of which would have requesters likely of their own. So I just wanted to show you that. If you're a smaller unit, you may only have one. You won't be able to select between anything else. But in some scenarios, you may. Kelly, a quick question in chat while we're waiting for this one to load up. Will you be able to access adaptive? Like, will there be a link or a way to access adaptive from the main Workday page? Or will you need to know to get to this via the link that we shared in chat?
Yeah, I saw that. I am not sure. I do believe that there will be a link directly in Workday, but I know for sure that there will be one on the FOD page, and then possibly on the pair page as well.
Yeah, I know for sure that kind of where you go now when you're entering a project request, you go to the FOD and you enter the project request details that you fill out that form. That will be replaced with the link. So there will be a lot of places that you can get to this data from. So I'm going to change my level to Ohio State Newark. Just that's been my pretend unit for most of these trainings. So I'm going to wait for that to load up before I add in the first project request. So I'm actually going to delete information from the last training session so it doesn't get us confused. Okay. So once you're navigated to the capital request sheet from your unit, I want to point out a couple of key things to note here. You can still change the version and the level from within the sheet. You can do that from a lot of different screens. So just want to point out again that if you're not in the test data for training version now, that go ahead and select it. You should have at least one sample project to reference as you're adding your sample project. But I just want to make sure that everyone is in the correct version. So we're just going to cover adding those kind of 3 fields that I mentioned a little bit ago here, just because this is the easiest thing to get tripped up on. It's by far the most complicated thing to do. Everything else after this is easy. But here is where you'll really get tripped up. And that's mainly because it just requires a few clicks in the right order, and you need to be able to know which they are. So the very first step is to add a new line. And the easiest way to do that is just to go up this little navigation, this toolbar up here, and hit the add row. Can everyone see that? So hopefully you'll be able to see that once you click that. Okay, there it goes. Just took it a second to think. This added a new blank row at the bottom of my sheet. So you'd be tempted here to just start typing away under this project request field. But if you do that, you're likely to either have it erased by the system or something else completely different will pop up and you'll be really confused and you'll be wondering why. And the reason why is because this is basically functioning as a drop-down box. And if you start typing something that doesn't exist in the drop-down box, it won't be able to find a match. And that's why it'll be clearing out your results. So in order to fix that, we actually need to go into this little drop-down box here. Click Edit Dimension here. This will bring up your Edit Project Request dialog box. Once everyone is here, you'll be able to, this is the kind of key field that you need to be able to know to click here, and that's to create the new dimension value. And that will bring us over our dimension value details where we'll actually finally be able to start typing in our project request. So we're going to be entering a sample project for the College of the Newark campus. So it's going to start NEW. I believe there's if it hasn't been posted yet, hopefully someone can post the link to the Administrative Resource Center, which shows you what your unit's abbreviations are. So that when we hand over the reins to everybody in the group, you'll know what you need to type here. So the abbreviation for Newark is NEW. This is a FY22 project request, so that next will be 22. And I'm just going to kind of look here on the shaded portion, and I'm just going to cheat a little bit and look to see what the last number is to know what my next number should be. So it looks like 3 was the last one. So we're going to have this one be project number 4. And we're going to say conference hall, conference room renovation. And before you click OK, if you click OK, it'll delete out what you just did. You need to be able to save this first by clicking this up here. You'll see that adaptive is doing some things, loading and making sure everything goes correctly. You'll see that you'll get the green check up here that everything went okay, and then you'll hit OK, and then you'll see that this is filled in finally. So it's a lot of clicks to add one row. That is the only field that you need to go through that many steps for. And that's just because you're creating a new line, creating a new record. It's a little bit more complex. For all of the other fields, it's either a drop-down box or you can just type directly in it. And then these next 2 fields are directly, they're exactly the same as what you just typed in earlier, just the 2 individual components. So conference. And then you'll notice that these fields are in blue, and that means that those are pending changes. In order to save something in your sheet, you just need to go up here, and once you click this, you'll see that it's saving your sheet. It does seem to be running a little bit slow today. And then you can see that my fields changed from blue to black, indicating that they've been saved in the system, and you're safe to navigate. Yeah, you're now safe to navigate away from the page. So since this really is the most complex, and I'm not going to say hard, but it's just kind of unintuitive to start out with. This is one of the things that we're hopefully working with Adaptive to come up with a process improvement on. They do pretty regular updates to the back end of their system. So hopefully this is something that we'll be able to streamline in the future to make it a little bit easier for future capital plan years. But for now, this is the process, and I just want to make sure that everyone understands how to do that. So we're going to jump right into basically an activity. If we had a larger group like we've had in the past, we normally go into breakout rooms for this, but I think that since we're a little bit smaller, we'll just stay in our main meeting window here. If you weren't following along with me, kind of working right along, go ahead now and try to repeat those same steps to add in your project. If anyone has any issues or gets caught up anywhere, maybe just go ahead. We'll ask you to share your screen and we'll guide you through it just to make sure. Sometimes having somebody else do it for everybody else to see is helpful as well. So we'll go ahead and do that now. I'll jump back to this so that if anybody has any questions, I can just kind of show them around. And I think if we don't have any, sorry, just going to my participant list. If you don't have any issues and you're able to get in and add your project requests, maybe just go ahead and give us you can give us a yes on the participants window or a thumbs up to let us know that you were able to add this correctly and you didn't run into any issues. Or let us know in chat if you are encountering something. Mark, I know you were probably, Mark, I know you were probably following along. Were you able to get into the system and add in a new project request? Sorry to call on you here, put you on the spot, but I just want to make sure that this really is the kind of the one key point I want to stress, because the rest, it's kind of all easy sailing from here, but I want to make sure everybody is able to get in and add a project request. Okay, yeah, thank you for sharing your screen. Yeah, so you might be on mute if you're saying something here. It does look like.
So Mark, you need to add a new row, I believe. So if you go up to, there's a save button and then there's the third button in, add a new row. Yep. And here you go. So then there should be a drop down arrow right there in that corner.
Yeah, you'll have to click away from that because it's opening up a little dialog box. So yeah.
Right there. Yep. And then the edit dimensions at the bottom. And then right above where the cursor was blinking, there's a plus sign. Yep. Click on that. And then add your in the name right there. So you want to use the format that we used. Yep, Newark 22. Good job.
Yep, that's it. Once you've done it one or two times, I still find myself doing the incorrect things sometimes. But once you've done it and you know the steps, you'll quickly remember what you need to do. So,
okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then once you've added it, you can. I'm actually going to steal back screen sharing here.
Okay. So has everybody been able to add a row?
Yes.
All right. Let me refresh this. Alrighty, so I'm in EHE right now. So if we're able to add a row and then the request ID and request description, I'm going to just add my new row here so we can keep going here. And very similar to Excel, you can use this as a copy paste as well. So I'm going to save that. So we're going to continue on here with just some of the definitions of these new columns that you guys are going to be using.
And sorry, I had a little bit of a Wi-Fi hiccup there. Thanks for taking over for me.
Oh,
I'm
you're
not sure.
welcome.
Yeah, not sure exactly when I cut out there, but
You were getting ready to share. So
okay.
do you want to take back over?
Yeah, I'll take back over and
Okay.
my screen.
There you go.
Okay. So yeah, sorry for that hiccup. Hopefully that was pretty seamless with Kelly jumping in there. So we would just added the project request. I did also want to, did we do the knowledge check for our project IDs yet before we move on to the rest of the fields? I just want to check in to make sure that we
Did not.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we have a really firm understanding of this. This is I think we have a real quick poll question that we'll be able to launch here. Just testing to make sure that everyone kind of understands this. So which of the following of the three that you just worked on must be unique? Is it the request itself, the request ID, or the request description? All of the above are unique, or none of the above are unique. And this is just to really hammer this home, because I think this really is kind of the key thing that we need to be able to understand from adaptive, the adaptive training. And the polls go pretty quick with not as many people here. So all of the, just kind of by virtue of the way that two unique fields, the request description and the request ID, those are unique fields by themselves. And then when you put two unique things together, you come out with a third unique thing. So all three of them are necessarily and it's mandatory that they be unique from all of your other projects. So I just wanted to make sure we hit that quiz before we moved on to the other fields. So we're going to work through kind of from left to right here before we get to the funding. And then I think once we get through this first initial set of fields, we'll be able to take a quick break and stretch our legs a little bit. So we'll work right through here. So the business justification is really just your long form explanation for what the project is. So this is your, what the project is, a little bit more detail on if there's anything unique or special you're asking for, just go ahead and plunk that right into the business justification here. So for this one, it's a pretty simple conference room renovation. So we're just going to say renovate conference room 201, Hopewell Hall, add project, I don't know why I'm capitalizing these, add projector and paint. And you can be as descriptive as you want. Just make sure that you're adding in enough detail so that the project managers and the people reviewing the projects understand what the project scope is. The next two fields, company and Workday, I'm gonna make this a little bit wider here so we can see. Workday balancing work tag are kind of linked together. Once you select one, you'll know what the next one is. So for a large majority, I don't think we have any health. I don't think we have any health system or hospital folks on. So for the large majority of projects, you'll just be selecting university here. And it's our hope that once you add this one here, this next one will be able to pre-populate. But for now, I believe university is FD 830. Kelly, I'll let you add more detail there.
Yeah, so these are linked to Workday. A lot of these fields are linked directly to Workday. The company, there are 4 companies in Workday, and that's the university, that's the health system, that's OSUP, and the OSU health system or health plan. And each one of those have a balancing work tag. And for university, and this has to do with the financials and where CIP and expenditures are represented on the financials, that balancing work tag is related to the company. So once you know that yours is a univ company and your balancing work tag is FD 830, you should be good to go.
Hopefully, once you know it, it'll be the same for all of your projects. So we'll just hopefully quick and second nature that you just select that. The next 2 fields are also linked, and this one, an integration does exist where once you pick one, the other will automatically know what it needs to be. So this is basically what cost center is going to be funding this project. So the easiest way to find this is if you know the name of it, or you know part of the name of it is to just type it in here and hit search, and you can see it returns a list of cost centers here. So we're just going to pick business and finance for this one. Once you make a selection under your cost center description, this cost center, this is the actual cost center number here. This will limit to be only to match what you just selected. So you can see New York Business and Finance, and it has the correct value here. If you needed this to be something different, I'm just going to pick something else here. Okay, we'll say capital equipment. You can see that clears out, and it'll return the new cost center. So just always type in your cost center, find what it is, and then you'll just be able to select the cost center here. The project owner is simply who within the unit is kind of the key point person who will be managing the project from within your unit. This will be who the project manager at FOD will be working with, who they'll be communicating with to make sure that the project gets done correctly. So a lot of the time it might just be the person entering the project. I'm just going to say that I'm the project owner on this one. The location is another drop-down box. This pulls data directly from our space management system. So it should always be up to date and reflect accurate information. Again, this is another field where the search button really comes in handy here. So I'm just going to type Hopewell Hall, and it'll return. So you can see that I can select between just the building itself, Hopewell Hall, and I can also select, if I wanted to drill down a little bit in more detail, I can actually select between floors 1 and 2. And that just gives us a little bit extra data that we can run reports on. Since we are doing a conference room 201 renovation, we're going to say that this is floor 2 in Hopewell Hall. Get down to the finest level of detail that you can. Some things to point out here is if you're building a new building, something that doesn't have a location yet, you can leave this field blank. But I would, if you're ever leaving this field blank, you definitely need to say in your business justification, that this is a new build, describe the site on where it's being built. Also, if the project is touching maybe multiple buildings, we ask that you pick kind of one primary building, the main building, so that we can reference back to, because this only lets you select one building at a time. So I would say the key building. Also, if it's something that's not listed, so maybe it's like a landscape or a green feature, something like that outside, you can select. What I would recommend is that you select the building outside of which that project is taking place, or the nearest adjacent building, or maybe if there's a building that's kind of associated with that green space, to go ahead and select that one. The request type is another drop-down box, and this field is important because it drives some formulas that happen later on when we're estimating the project expenses. So it's important to understand a little bit kind of what your project is. For most of the time, you'll probably just be doing simple renovations. We do have options here for design only. So if you're working on a larger project that will have a design only component that's being approved in the capital plan, you can select that here. Also for units, I don't think we have any on this call today, but for units that have like bundles of project, like Student Life usually has like a repair and renovation bundle that they do every year that gets approved in the capital plan. You can select bundled project here as well. So for this one, it's a simple renovation, so we're just going to click that before moving on. These next few fields are pre-populated by the system and default to no. So you just kind of need to understand when you need to change these to yes, basically. If the project is going to be a direct replacement for some other capital asset that we have, so if you're buying a new plane or a bus that's directly replacing something else that's going out of service, or maybe even like a building is being built that's replacing another building that's either going offline or whatever that may be, indicate here that it's a replacement project. And again, I'll say that if you're ever changing any of these fields to yes, it's always a good idea to throw in the business justification, a little bit more detail on why these were changed from no to yes. Impact on operating and generate revenue are kind of whether or not the project creates any new revenue or expenses for your unit. So a good example of this is if you were building a new conference room that's being maybe rented out to other people on campus or to the general public, and it's going to create a new revenue stream for you, you would indicate that that project generates revenue. And that gives our business and finance team, it kind of gives them the flag that, hey, they need to look at that, make sure that your financials are, they make sense and that they're accurate to the project. Impact on operating, similar. If you're creating new space that will either have, will require new janitorial or new staff or something like that. Basically anything that's new compared to how it was previously. So any new operating costs, you would indicate that here. Since this is an existing conference room, our sample project that we're just renovating and we're making it a little bit nicer, we're going to leave these all as no. Kelly mentioned much earlier on about how there's an FOD estimate process that they run. And these next two fields are kind of the key way that you need to understand on how that is done. So for most of the projects done by the university, managed by FOD, they will be an e-builder project. So for a lot of these, the answer is going to be yes. However, whether or not you need an e-builder estimate that's entirely up to the unit yourself. So you can still, if you traditionally are getting project estimates from consultants or third parties, you can continue doing that, basically how you get estimates now. However, this is a new process where if you're entering a project request for a renovation project or you're planning for one, you can actually request an estimate from FOD directly from here. If you were to select this to yes, and say that, I'm not exactly sure how often they run the report, but FOD basically runs the report on all of these sheets that says, look for new projects that were added that are e-builder projects and that need estimates. And that basically triggers their process where they know to reach out to the unit, basically the project contact that we entered a little bit earlier on, reach out to them and say, hey, we saw you need a project estimate, and they'll kick that process off officially. And through that, they'll enter a project into eBuilder, get that kicked off. They'll generate the estimate with its date, and through that process, and once you get that data, you can fill that in later. If you are getting the estimate from anywhere else, or if you already have one, you can just set this to no. Okay, so we'll leave these next three fields blank because we don't have an estimate yet. But once FOD were to give us that estimate, we'd be able to fill that information in here. So moving over to some of the kind of temporal components of the project. For capital projects, this next one is very important because it lets us know what capital plan year you want a project to start in. So for next spring's capital plan that'll be approved by the board, those will all be 2022 projects. You can enter projects for fiscal years, and in fact, we highly encourage that you use this tool to hold projects, even if you don't have a firm start date for them yet. Just enter in as much detail as you have, even if it's just a project name and a brief description of it, and then make a guess on when you think that project is likely to start. I think we give you 10 years here to be able to move out into the future. So if you think it'll be like a 2025 or 2029 project, make a guess. There's nothing that prevents you from updating these as time goes on. And anything that you enter into this sheet that doesn't get approved in the capital plan automatically carries forward into the next version. So you don't have to worry about re-entering those projects every year. So you can kind of just get it into the system and then just update it as time goes on. But for this one, we need this to be approved in the capital plan in the 2022 plan. So we're going to enter that's the targeted fiscal year. The estimated start date, if you don't have a preferred date for when the project you think should start, planning always recommends to just say January 1st of that fiscal year. If some units specifically would like projects to start, either in the summer or the following spring, like Student Life specifically does a lot of their R&R projects when the students are gone for the year. And they do like 3 months in from May to July or whatever where they're doing there. So they might set their project more specifically to a date, but for all other projects, if you don't have a preferred date, just set it to January of that fiscal year. Again, the estimated end date, if you have an idea of what your project timeline will look like, that'll just be when the project will be wrapping up. If not, just based on, an 18th month or 12 month or whatever, kind of based on the size of the project. This is a required field for the information to flow into the other systems. So even if it's just a rough guess based on what you know about the project, you should be entering something here. So we're just going to say that this is going to be a year long. It's a long time for renovating a conference room, but that's what we're going to say. I want to point out here also, as we're working from left to right, you see that we have a lot of fields that are in blue. That indicates that that's all data that, even though you've made a change, hasn't been saved by Adaptive yet. And this goes for every system. It's always good to save often while you're working through this. You'll never know when your Wi-Fi cuts out and you get kicked off, like happened to me a little bit ago. So saving often is always a good idea here, just to prevent you from losing your work. You can see that those have all changed from blue to black. The data has been saved in the system. So the next three fields are kind of unique and are really only used if you are working on kind of a component project or one that's related to other projects that are happening on campus. But it's really useful if it is. So if, for instance, you were doing a project that occurred in multiple phases, or you were doing a project that was happening in parallel to another project and they must be worked on together, you can actually indicate whether the project is related to anything else right here within Adaptive. So if, for instance, this was phase one of a two-phase project, you can indicate that this was a sequential project and then enter your related request ID right next to it. And that's a really handy way for keeping track just of your own projects, but also for us as planners to be able to see, we know this project needs to happen before this other project, so it lets us kind of build out our project roadmaps a little bit better, and then also just our project planning. So if you have projects that are related to others, this is where you'll keep that information. This is also useful. So maybe another example where you might use this is if FOD is doing like an infrastructure project or an enabling project that allows your project to happen. Even if it's not your project, you can indicate that the project is dependent, I believe is one of the options here. I don't know why my Adaptive is going so slow today. But you would be able to select that the project is dependent on another project and indicate which one that was directly into the system. Oh, that's fun. I need to log back
There
in.
is some lag with mine as well.
Okay, so maybe it's just adaptive is being a little bit slow today.
Well, my Skype is doing the same thing, so
Okay.
I think it's a system.
Yeah, and actually, what just happened to me is kind of important. You can see that my my little name badge up here had a little lock up here on it. That indicates that the system, even though I'm still viewing it, has logged me out. So I actually need to log back in before it lets me do anything. Yeah, there must be some updates or changes happening in the system right now. That's okay. For those of you who need information on how to log in again, see right now. So just your email address. No, they say we'll bring you to the OSU login page. Okay, we're just going to jump right back. Kind of another neat trick here is if you want to jump right to the capital request sheet, you can actually hit one more over, and you'll be able to click it right from here. Okay, so moving right back over to where we were. It's a good thing that I saved because otherwise that may have been pretty frustrating. But yeah, as I was saying, you would be able to select whether it's dependent, and then you would be able to enter that project information here. Even if it's not your project, you can just type that in. And then again, we give you a notes field here. Generally, if there's a large project or it's happening over multiple capital requests, we'll need some information on why that's happening. So this next field, before we get into our next demo, is the unit approval status. And we'll cover this more later, but this is basically adaptive gives you the flexibility to manage the project approval process however you want within your unit, whether that is you have one person entering projects and then you have a meeting where you go over them and approve them together, or you are just one person who is entering and then you're changing them to pending so that you know to go back to them. How you manage that, the unit approval status is up to the units. Everybody has access to edit this field to what they want it to be. What matters for the process, for the capital planning process and getting a project into the capital plan, is that you change this from whatever pending or denied or whatever it may be to approved. So kind of thinking through this, approved really is the, you're giving your, that's your full unit approval. That's your in full fiscal stewardship of the university. You're acting in its best interest. It's ready to go to the board for approval. How you manage those other options here and what that process looks like within your unit. Every unit is unique. Some are small. They have 1 or 2 people managing the capital request process. Some have a team of people who are working on requests from multiple units like Student Life does. So we just give you that flexibility. However, for this one, we're just gonna, I'm Joe Requester, and I'm just gonna go ahead and submit this to the CFO or the dean or whomever is reviewing these requests. And that's where we're gonna stop with the demo. We're gonna cover the costs and the financing in a different section. But for now, we're gonna jump right into basically the activity portion here. We need, we're gonna pick somebody. I don't know if, Mark was able to share his screen earlier. Mark, do you mind walking through? You were probably working along with us, so you might have a lot of these fields filled out. Were there any fields that you ran into that you weren't 100% sure on what they were for? I think that these, the rest of these fields are pretty self-explanatory for the most part. So I don't actually expect as many questions as with the first part, but we would like, somebody to make sure, we want to make sure that people are getting in and making changes to the test data. So yeah, thank you, Mark.
So I think I'm actually logged out as well. So
Yeah, it must have been yeah.
how,
So
how do I get back to the login screen?
Yeah, so you could just click up the MT where you see the little padlock up there, and then just hit sign out. Even though you're already signed out, that will bring you back to the sign in page. Down a little bit, center blue button. to the right. Yep, okay. Yeah, and then just, you can just, where it says, yeah, click here to log in again. Yeah, so it looks like you were pretty much adding information for your project right along with us. So, yeah, so I mean, if anybody has any questions, this is generally a shorter demo here. So unless anybody has any questions, you know, either in chat or if you want to just take a moment now to, we can talk through this again. I think that for the most part, this is, I mentioned, pretty self-explanatory. So if we don't have any questions, I think we can just move right into a quick break. We'll take like 10 minutes. Yeah, very straightforward. So yeah, that's good. Yeah, so we'll take, I'm looking at the clock here, take maybe a 10-minute break, come back at 9:45, and then we'll jump into our next section and talk about project funding. So thanks everybody for your patience and your work so far. We're through, I think, the hardest part of the training. So the rest is just some more demonstrations and showing you around the system. So we'll see you all in 10 minutes. More, so we'll talk about the funding sources and then complex funding scenarios, as well as some multi-year projects. We'll touch on all of that here. So the goal for this section is to be able to successfully divide a request into multiple funding sources. Not all projects are funded with just local dollars. So understanding how you add additional funding sources when necessary. And then also describing a similar scenario where if you have a funding source that won't be coming in until maybe year 2 or year 3 of the project. So we'll touch on all of that. All right, so I did want to point out before we switched back over to adaptive, I wanted to point out some of the different funding sources that you can select between. So I'm not going to read through all of these right now, just I want to give everyone a chance to look at them. One thing I did want to point out, one of the funding sources that we added or made sure that we specifically called out for this is particularly with like regional campuses. If you are doing a project where your co-located partner campus is pitching in some funds, or maybe you're both steering your appropriations towards a particular project that will be done together. If there's funding source coming from the partner campus, you can indicate that with other partnership funding. And that's one of the funding sources that you can select between here. So for all the others, they look pretty similar to what you've been able to select as funding sources in the past. One other funding source note I would like to make is that with gift dollars, development dollars, before it was just one category. You'd mentioned that there was a fundraising component to your project. We now let you select, kind of drill down a little bit deeper and select between 3 different options there. Whether you have a gift that's been pledged, so they've signed a gift agreement, you know that the money is kind of on its way. Whether you have the gift that's already been received, you have the cash in hand, you can select that. And also unsecured fundraising. If you have just a fundraising goal or kind of a target that you've set for yourself, but you don't have any guarantee that the dollars are there or will be there, you can indicate that with unsecured fundraising. So I'm going to jump right into the demo. Back over to adaptive. All right. So we had just submitted our project, so we're going to kind of step into the role of maybe a CFO or a dean, someone who has some greater idea of how the project financing will work, to add in the rest of the information here. So we're going to say that this just barely meets the threshold for a capital request. So we're going to say that it's a $200,000 project. You'll note here that it breaks down between unit costs and number of units. The reason that we do that is, so sometimes with capital equipment requests, you might be buying 3 pieces of a capital equipment at $200,000 each. So when it comes to the total project cost, it gets calculated correctly. For general construction and renovation requests like this one, you'll just enter the total project cost and then the number of units will just be 1. You can see that we have this little kind of gray box here that has project cost, funding, and variance, and they're all blank now. That's because I haven't saved my work yet. So I'm going to save this real quick and we'll start seeing some of these boxes get populated. So once you've added your unit cost, and as long as you have selected a project type, so that was back, we selected renovation, there were those other options for new construction, things like that. As long as you've selected those and have indicated the project start date, some things will automatically populate here. So you'll see that the total project request is $200,000 that populated from our unit cost and number of units. You see that we don't have any funding because we haven't identified any yet. And because of that, our variance is $200,000. You'll also notice that as you go over to the right, Adaptive has automatically estimated expenses for year 1 and year 2. Adaptive applies a formula based on the project size and the project type that estimates the cash flow for as many years as it thinks it will go on. Again, these are just estimated. These can always be, once the project is approved and gets moved over to Workday and into eBuilder, these can be updated and checked against, but for the planning purposes and what actually goes to the board for approval on the capital plan, we're using these numbers just as kind of rough placeholder estimates. In order to add funding source, we're gonna jump over here to the funding source column here. So you can see that we have our drop-down box where we can select between all of those different options. For this one, we're gonna say that we have $200,000 of local funding ready to go. We're gonna skip funding agreement for now, but we're just gonna enter this right here. So we're gonna have all the funding available in year 1. So we're gonna save this and let this update again so we can see our changes. To our grayed out box here, you can see that our total project costs are still our $200,000, and now we have $200,000 of funding identified. So we have a $0 variance. This project is pretty much ready to go. So that's it for adding project funding. It really is pretty simple as long as you know your funding sources. And maybe important thing to note, if you're adding projects for future years and you don't have funding sources identified yet, it's fine to leave these blank for projects that are happening in future years. You can always update, as time goes on and funding starts to kind of become a little bit more clear, and projects kind of start to crystallize a little bit and get ready for approval and implementation. You can always update these as time goes on. And as I mentioned earlier, projects that are not approved in one version will automatically carry over into the next fiscal year's version. So you don't have to worry about re-entering data. You'll just be updating them as time goes on. So the next thing that I want to cover is multiple funding sources. Not every project will be able to be completed just with local dollars. In fact, our last capital plan, we had one project, I think had 4 or 5 funding sources. So the way that you accomplish that within Adaptive is by splitting these project rows. And the way that you do that, we're going to be working on this conference room renovation. Anywhere within this row, if you right click, you'll see that you have the option to split row. And what that does, basically, you split the row one time for every funding source that you have. So we're going to say our scenario is going to change a little bit. We have $150,000 of local funding and a $50,000 gift. So we need to split the row 2 times. And I'm just going to do that right at the beginning. I'm going to split it once. Oh, hopefully Adaptive doesn't log me out again. Okay, we split it once and we're going to split it one more time. Okay, so now that we have our 2, you can see that this created 2 split rows underneath this parent row. What the split rows are, the only information that you'll ever be entering in the split rows is the funding source. Everything else is calculated at the parent level and is kind of inherited down to the child rows, whereas the funding sources kind of go up to the parent row. So we're going to change this to reflect our new funding scenario. So we're going to change our local funding to 150. And we're going to say that we have a gift that we've received. Oops, no, we'll just say gift pledge to 50,000. This funding agreement field here is useful for you if you've been working with FOD, the design and construction team. to move funds over, or you're maybe working with the central university, you're taking maybe an internal bank loan that'll be used that you're signing a funding agreement for, you can indicate that here. And that's when you're doing that, you'll know that that's useful, that you'll be able to select that here. But I just wanted to mention that now. So let me go ahead and save this so we can see our changes reflected. Okay, so now you can see, we're going to jump back over to our kind of handy gray box here. You can see that the project costs and funding are still accurate. They're the funding information is coming up from the child rows to total up to the 200,000. The variance in the child rows, you don't really need to worry about so much. It always zeroes out, by the end of the project in the year. It's just the way that Adaptive inherits some things from the parent and some things from the children go up. You don't need to look at the split row variances. They're not really that important. What matters is the top level project row variance that zeroes out. And then you can see our funding sources here are all set. So that's it. You can split rows as many times for as many funding sources as you have. So you can, split 3 or 4 times if you're working on a project with, maybe you have a grant funding, maybe you have partnership funding, whatever it may be. There's no practical limit on the number of times that you can split a row. We're going to change our scenario one more time to make it a little bit different. We're going to say that this gift isn't received yet, and it won't be received until we're going to keep it as gift pledge, but we're going to change this to year 2 instead. So this would be useful for when funding is coming in the future. Year 1 is always the year that the project is initiated. If you don't expect funding until year 2 or year 3, you just put the funding there. So we're going to change this funding over to year 2. Save one more time. Yeah, so you'll be able to see now that we have funding of $150,000, which is our local funding that's available in year 1. And then our funding in year 2, which if we look over to the left, is our gift that's been pledged that we'll be receiving in year 2. You can see that in our little gray summary box that the total funding it captures all of the different years of funding and the funding sources, and that's all good to go. So another example like that you would put, so generally internal loans, you're going to spend your local dollars first before a local fund is dispersed later on. You would indicate that an internal loan might be coming, especially for larger projects, might not be coming until year 2 or year 3 of a project. And that's how you would capture that correctly in the system. Okay, so we're going to go back very briefly to a quick.
Kevin, just to add to that, I wanted to say, yep, if they don't know, if you don't know that as you are entering the request, you can update that as you go throughout the process. That can be updated. So
yeah,
it's not set in stone on that first submission.
Right, that's a good thing to point out. Once you've entered a project in here, you're free to make updates pretty much right up until the time that we close off. For capital requests specifically, you're able to make updates right up until the time that we cut off requests in early December. So if your funding is still kind of being completely ironed out, you don't have it 100% set in stone yet, you can log in, in another week or 2 weeks and update these. Once you add it, it's not locked. You can always update these as time goes on. Yeah, so we're going to jump. We have another poll here real quick that we're going to launch just to cover the funding sources. Get this poll launched. We should have a poll being able to be launched here, I'm thinking. I think there it goes. Yeah, so just a couple of quick questions on the funding sources. True or false, when you're reviewing the amounts of multiple funding sources, so that's your split rows, you should be looking at the split rows themselves. That's a true or false question. And then the variances in the parent line one are they offset and offset by the rows? They're okay in a single year, zeroed out by the end of the project, or all of the above. While we're wrapping up the poll here, one question that came through in chat is whether you'll be notified if a project goes over budget. So just to clarify what kind of adaptive is and isn't. So adaptive is your planning tool where you're requesting projects and you're putting together the information. Once projects are approved in adaptive, they move into Workday and to eBuilder, where the FOD, the project implementation team, really, they take the budget and they start, the construction and paying the invoices and things like that. All of those types of questions will be handled within, and maybe Kelly can help here a little bit. All of those will be managed within eBuilder for managing project expenses like that. And I think that'll be visible in Workday. Maybe you can talk on that for just a second.
Yeah. So once a project is approved in adaptive and it gets approved in the capital plan and moves forward, it gets loaded into Workday. It's issued a Workday project number, and then it's managed in Workday. And so then if it is an FOD project, there are integrations going back and forth between Workday and eBuilder, maintaining your actuals and start dates, end dates, any budget amendments that are done back and forth between the two systems, so that they're both saying the same thing on a consistent basis.
Yeah. So yeah.
So if the project goes over budget, you as the user in the system should be able to go in and view your project to see if it's staying on budget. Yep.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. That kind of.
Is that helpful? Is that helpful, Sarah?
Yep. So she said thanks in the chat.
Okay. Yep.
Yep.
Great.
Okay. Yeah. So are there any other questions before we move on? That really kind of wraps up the capital, and the process is the same for non-capital requests. So for just general room renovations or painting requests, whatever it may be, the process will be exactly the same, except you won't have that multiple year view of the project like you do with a capital project. So what you just saw is applicable to every project request and will be the process starting in January. So for non-capital requests. For capital requests, the system is available for FY22 projects right now. You can get in and change your version to that FY22 project request and start entering your requests. Or for if you looked at the C&I report or you log in now, those will need to be re-entered as well. But we'll talk on that before we wrap up. Okay, so we'll go ahead and move right along. We're going to just jump through here. We're going to leave our capital request sheet for a brief time, and we're going to talk about reporting with adaptive. So if you've worked with me on capital plan projects before, you'll know that every year about this time, in fact, you should be seeing one soon in a shared folder if you haven't received it already. But you would have to email me if you ever needed to see a report on your capital requests, or you needed to see a report on what things were pending versus approved, things of that nature. And now we can directly tap into the information via some pre-configured reports within Adaptive. And you can kind of tweak them a little bit to match what you need, or even create your own reports. We don't cover creating reports here. We just kind of go over some of the pre-made reports that are available for you to view. So we're going to go to our navigation bar, and we're going to go to reports. Hopeful that the reports will run a little bit faster than the sheet did. So you can see when you get here, you'll notice that the data is blank. You also have the ability to select between versions here. If you want to report on previous fiscal year's projects, you can do that. But for today, just double check to make sure you're still in that test data for training. We're going to click on the shared reports folder. This is where we have all of the reports that we've made available for everybody to view. And we're going to jump right into the unit project request detail report here down at the bottom. We're just going to show a couple of sample reports and then make sure that you can follow along. I recommend that you follow along right now to make sure that you can get in and view these. Okay, so I have view access for all of the levels, so it looks a little bit busy right now. So I'm going to change my parameters. That's that 3 sliders you just saw me click. I'm going to change my my level to view only new work project, which is what we were just working on. So you can also see that here, if you do have access to multiple levels, you can change your level here. You can also view only if you want to see only renovation projects, or maybe you want to see only equipment projects, you can change that filter here. And then another opportunity for you to change the version. But for now, I'm just going to change my level to view only new work projects. There, and you can see that we have some pending and submitted projects. We have the project that I just entered as we were working through the exercise today, and you can also see that it's reflected that it has multiple funding sources. So you can see that it accurately reflects what we entered as we were working through. So that's just one view. This is kind of a nice a summary report of projects by their status. So it's just kind of a useful at a glance. Let's go back and look at one more. You can always navigate back to the reports page by clicking reports up here. You don't have to go back into the Workday and then kind of back around. You can just click reports to bring you back to the page we were just at. We'll have a look at one more here. Let's look at the Capital Core project request detail, and we'll go with the fiscal year data this time. So here's another view. This is a more financial based breakdown of reports that are pending in the adaptive. And I'm going to change my level here. You can see I made a change, and in order for that change to actually take effect, you can see my run report button turned orange. That means that there's a pending change that I made that I need to run the report to update the screen. Okay, so much fewer projects here. You can see that we have our projects that we've entered, and then you can see a fiscal year breakdown of estimated expenses. And this again is calculated by the system. It uses the project size, and when you estimate that the project will start, to estimate fiscal year expenses, and then it gives you a nice summary row at the bottom. So this is a good planning tool if you want to see what your capital expense outflow is likely to be for the next 5 or 6 years. This is a nice report for you to be able to see and do that. So there's no activity here where we're going to request anybody share their screens or anything, but everybody should be able to navigate to the report and see the example project that you entered during the activity here. Just make sure that you're able to see that. I think that that's just kind of a good validation way that you know that what you're changing is actually being reflected into the reports. So I know that was a pretty brief summary. It's nothing really complex about getting to the reports and viewing them, but I do want to just make sure that everybody was able to, if anyone has any questions about reports. I know that I mentioned that you can tweak some of those reports on the back end. We don't get into building reports here, but if there's ever a report that you think that would be helpful for you that you don't see it built in Adaptive, you can reach out to us and we can try to put something like that together. And if we do have enough interest, I don't think anyone's asked for it so far, but if there's people who want to learn what the building reports tool is like, maybe we can do a separate, like more one-on-one training on that, just because it's kind of, it's pretty in the weeds, and knowing what fields live where is just a little complex, probably too complex for a larger group, so. Okay, so
Kevin, I don't know if you wanted to go to the dashboard as well.
oh yeah,
To show them the dashboard. We just created some dashboards for the capital and non-capital. Maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe not.
Maybe not. Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to go out on a limb and say Adaptive is working on something behind the scenes right now.
Yep. I would be out on that limb with you.
Yep.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah. Just running very slow. Yeah. So Adaptive has this really great interactive dashboard. I need to go to the other test data, right, to get this to work right.
Yep. Yes.
So yeah, it has this really great interactive dashboard where you can view at a glance, the number of pending projects, the number of submitted projects, the total dollar amount of projects that are either pending or have been approved, and then you can drill down into to get more advanced details on. This is something that's new. We like Kelly mentioned, we just built these, but you can see that you have some nice summary charts. You can also go to like a request overview and see some more detailed information. I won't spend too much time here just because it seems that loading is going to be a pretty big issue, and I'll try not to bog us down waiting for that when I can avoid it. But yeah, you can see that you see just really useful things. It's nice to just be able to log in, go one place and see, we have a number of projects requested that are, not approved yet and things like that. So.
And also that third tab there shows us the list of projects that are being manipulated by the dashboards. So
yeah, so this is basically just your source data, and it's really, really nice. You can basically peek right into the capital request sheet from within the dashboard, and just really nice to be able to look over there if you don't want to navigate away from your dashboard.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll have some time here, just a brief discussion break. I know that we don't have a lot of people in here, so if we don't spend too long on this slide, that's fine. Just to talk about what you're looking forward to in Adaptive, or if you're a capital planner, what features you're excited for compared to the CNI system. I can speak just from personal experience that being able to build reports is going to be so much more streamlined than it used to be, where we would have to export data from that old CNI system, which was introduced to be a stopgap measure, but then became our primary system for almost 10 years. And we'd have to import it into an Excel file, build a template around it. And if we needed to make a change to the data, we'd have to go all the way back to that CNI system and run through the whole process again. And now we're directly tapped into that system, and running reports is basically live as soon as we make the changes. So that's something nice. Yeah. Yeah, and the dashboards too. I saw the dashboards for the first time like maybe just over a week ago, and I was really surprised at how useful and how friendly they were. Just being able to see, because sometimes just staring at a spreadsheet, we've been staring at computer screens now at home for months. Just being able to see something a little bit more visually interactive is really nice. Yeah. Yeah. So we're going to talk briefly about approvals. I mentioned earlier on that the approvals process. Adaptive isn't describing or isn't, prescribing how you need to do your approval process. How you manage that internally within your unit is up to you. You have that freedom. What matters for us and what will matter for FOD for their projects is that at the end of the day, when you're ready for a project to either be included in the capital plan or ready to start, at the end of the day, you've had the proper person changing the line to approved. And that really kind of is the summary that we have here. So we'll talk really briefly, just kind of describe when and where to note approval in adaptive planning. We've already showed you that field once, but I'll jump back to it so you can see it again. And then viewing the reports that are helpful for approvers to know which which projects are ready for approval. So we have a quick true or false question here that we're going to ask, just because it seems a little bit unintuitive at first, but it's important that you understand that you have flexibility within your unit to manage this your own way. So it's input in approval fields is restricted to adaptive planning approvers only. So that's that field that we saw that lets you change it from submitted to pending to approved. And whether or not it's true, that's editing that is restricted to approvers only. So it looks like we have just about everybody answering the poll here, and we'll not spend too much time waiting for responses here. So yeah, so it's actually false. Since you have the flexibility within your unit, if this is something where you have one meeting kind of at the end where you review all of the details and someone's in there with the approver and they say, yeah, go ahead and check that to approve. How you manage that is we give you that flexibility. So, and as a byproduct of that, pretty much anybody, you know, as long as they're within your level, still restricted by level, but people in your unit are able to change the fields from submitted to denied to, you know, or pending, whatever it may be. Okay, so fields for approvers. We're going to jump. This won't be a big, long demo, but it will be something I want to touch on some more information. Jump back to our capital request sheet. So I'm going to talk here kind of on approvals, and this discussion will be based and kind of focused primarily on capital requesters, as it doesn't necessarily apply for non-capital requests since that is open year round. So for capital requesters, you know that every year we open up a project entry period from, you know, around the beginning of October through the end of November, early December, right around that Thanksgiving timeframe. And that's the time that we ask that you go in, review your projects that are in the system, make any updates, and then also enter in new project requests. Before, that was kind of a soft cutoff date. We'd say, get your project requests in by Thanksgiving, and then we'll start reviewing them. With Adaptive, we actually can physically shut off access to the sheet. So it's really important now to make sure that you have all of the projects that you want to move forward for approval in the FY22 capital plan in Adaptive, you know, and then a check to approved before that time comes. Just because we as the capital approvers will be able to get in and view and make changes, but the users won't be able to. We'll lock that access down. So there are some opportunities, you know, some things always come up where something comes last minute that needs to be added. We can accommodate those requests. You know, we work with us to get through those. But once it's locked, it's pretty much locked to all. That doesn't that is not true of non-capital requests. You can enter just general construction requests year round. That sheet will be open all throughout the year. There's no similar limit for non-capital requests. But just to remember, as an approver, once you've checked yes, you know, checked approved on that, you're acting in the university's best interest, and that kind of comes with your full approval. So we're gonna check the wrong version here. And I'm just going to show one more time where that field lives. If you don't all have it memorized already, exactly where this is. So we're going to say we just had our meeting where we talked about our new funding source. We're meeting with the dean or the CFO, whoever that may be, and we've given the final sign off. The funding sources are, we believe, to be 100% accurate, and we've just been given the sign off to changes to approve. Once you approve a project, you can still go back and make an update if something changed a little bit later on. You can make an update. You can make an update at that time, but really that's kind of the end of your work within Adaptive. I also want to point out at this time some additional fields that exist. Just since we're here now, it's a good time to look at them. If you were to keep working right after all of these estimated funding and expense columns, you'll notice that you get to some columns that have asterisks at the beginning of them. These indicate that they're fields that are applicable to the capital core or FOD specifically. So they'll go in and add, once they're kind of checking in your projects and reviewing them, they'll be adding their own information to the project lines. You don't need to worry about these ones. Once you get to these asterisk columns at the end here, you're done. There are no more fields after that you need to worry about. And then one more, this this report will make more sense once there's actual data in the system. But there was one more report that I wanted to look at that was specifically kind of geared towards approvers. It functions similarly to it. It's almost like a dashboard view. But we're going to look at the approval tracking of project requests report. And I think that I just like pulling this one out because I think that it's useful for approvers to be able to get a kind of at a glance view of what they've got pending. So I'm going to, where's my level? Okay. So you can see here, it's again, this is on all the levels I have access to. So it's pretty busy. Let's actually look at the college's view because that might make more sense. But you can see here, so you normally wouldn't have access to all of these levels, but for like the College of Arts and Sciences or EHE, you would be able to see I have 4 project requests, and then you would actually be able to track whether they've been approved by your unit, and then kind of as they enter the capital core process, and we're working with all of the people that we work with to validate things. You'll be able to check to see as the process moves along, as these things are being reviewed. So this is just kind of a nice spreadsheet view of tracking tracking all of the approvals as they move through the system. So just another quick report I'd like to show. So before we've covered a lot of the main material that we're going to cover today. So we do want to take an opportunity now, if there are any situations or scenarios, either with funding sources or just the way that your unit does project planning and capital project planning, if there's something that doesn't quite fit into the mold that Adaptive has made for you, let us know now. We'd like to try to make this system fit and work for everybody. So if there's something that we didn't cover or something that's not quite, doesn't quite jive right with the way that you do things, let us know now, and we'll see if we can't either talk you through it or figure out how it'll work. Okay. Yeah, I think it appears to work. Good. Yeah, I think we've had, for the most part, we've been, there haven't been a lot of questions. I think that it's flexible enough that the approval process will work kind of with, it fits right in with the way that it works today. So, which has been good to hear. Check the chat here for another. Okay. Yeah. So if you have any other questions, or once you're in and start using the system for capital requests, I'm there working with you the whole way. So if you run into anything where it's just like, this doesn't quite fit into Adaptive, just reach out to us and we'll hopefully be able to help out. So kind of thinking about what's next. So right now you should have, I believe I've sent them all out at this point. For capital requesters, you'll receive a report of projects that were pending as of the time the CNI system basically went offline. It's still available, but it's in read-only view for right now, so you can still log in and view requests. You just can't add or change anything now. So I sent out a report that shows all of the projects that were in the CNI system for you to review and then re-enter into Adaptive. That is available for you to do now up until December 7th, I believe I set as the cutoff date for capital project requests for FY 2022. So you have from now until then to re-enter your existing projects, add new requests. And in the meantime, while you're doing that, use the Administrative Resource Center that we sent that link along back with our first activity. There are guides there that show you how to generate your unique IDs, add line, basically everything that I showed you today. There's just really handy work guides that walk you through that just as a reminder as you start entering projects. So definitely check that out as you're working, because they are very helpful. So one last thing that we like to do, and this just helps us for our training. For when we do these, it's nice to know how we did about the projects, about how you feel about the new system and the training as it went along. So just go ahead and tell us what you think. Keep us honest. If there's anything else, any comments, you can put them in chat before we wrap up today. Okay. Yeah, so it looks like you either feel more comfortable than at the beginning, or you feel pretty good because it's reinforced what you already knew. So that's good. It's nice that these training sessions are useful. I know that I focus a lot on the capital aspect of this, but the process is exactly the same for other construction requests as well. So for your smaller projects, your painting and minor R&R, the process is exactly the same, where you're adding your project requests and adding all the information about them. It's just those projects are under $200,000 and exist within another sheet. So I do want to thank everybody. I know it was a small group, so we got through this pretty quickly. Again, here's that link to the Administrative Resource Center. If you have any questions in the meantime, or you run into any issues with the system, or you just need, maybe some more information about it, feel free to reach out to us. We're more than happy to help out. But other than that, thanks again for coming to the training session. I hope you all have a good rest of your week and a good weekend.